Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of It's Not All Rainbows. I'm your host, Lindsay Goodman. I'm a certified trauma recovery coach, and I'm also a survivor of abuse in a queer relationship. I'm here to help you figure out what's really going on in your relationship, to help get you out of that abusive relationship and get you on the road to healing and taking your life back. Today, I'm going to talk to you about, is it attachment issues? Is it insecure attachment? Or is it abuse? This is a question that I get from time to time on social media, or someone will point it out. I'll show some sort of covert abuse tactic, and a lot of people will come on and say, well, this is just a matter of, anxious attachment versus avoidant attachment. And the big spoiler is, I thought that too for a very long time. So before we dive into that, and, of course, I'm not saying that attachment doesn't exist, but we'll get there. I will do my struggles and successes for this week. A struggle is that I am having a flare up of my physical health issues that I luckily acquired while I was with my abuser. I'm sarcastic, if you can't tell. Also, I apologize, YouTube. I am toasting. It's not even that hot outside. But my car is very hot. It's all black. I'm wearing black, and I need to adjust before I got in too deep and was just like sweating here, looking wild. Um, Yeah, so I'm having a flare up. I think I did too much physical activity. I did a lot. It's not always like, oh, I just did a little bit and now my body's like falling apart. I did a lot. I did too much. I was really running with it. And typically what happens for me is when I have my physical health flare ups, um, I'll start to get pain in like my right trap, and then I get inflammation all the way down my right side, all the muscles, all the joint, everything. So I'm just sitting here like, ugh. And it can be frustrating because it's a reminder of where I was. It's a reminder that this is how I lived for a very long time when I was in the thick of it, and I was always under stress. I was always in fight or flight, and I had this muscle spasm in my trap for. I can feel it right now. It's inflamed, but it's nowhere near what it was. And I had it like that for years, and I just could not get control of the sort of autoimmune issues, just physical health issues that I was experiencing at that time. So. Um, that's my struggle. My success is that that is not my norm anymore. I do have flare ups. They are frustrating, and I do like to share and talk about them and remind people that this can unfortunately be our new normal after abuse. A lot of people, have a lot of autoimmune issues from childhood abuse or neglect, as well as from abusive relationships. So I have to keep that in mind. I mean, it's okay to be, bummed out about it, of course, but I do have, that is going to be my success is that, of course, I'm out of that situation and my body is doing so much better than it was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and so on. So let's dive into the question. Are you experiencing abuse, or is this just an attachment situation? Is it just that one of you is anxious attachment and one of you is avoidant attachment and you guys just can't get on the same level? Or, sometimes things are okay, but something comes up and you notice there's issues. Um, if you don't know a lot about attachment, I definitely recommend looking into it. I'm not going to talk about all the ins and outs of attachment styles, but I will go over each of them briefly to the best of my ability, with the disclaimer that this is something that I was learning about a lot when I was with my abuser. I read the book Attached. I forget who the author is. And I don't remember how I found that, but I discovered attachment styles, and this became one of my quote unquote answers to what the problem was in the relationship, which is why I want to talk about this here. Um, Attachment is a very real thing. When we're little, we develop either a healthy attachment to our caregivers or an unhealthy attachment. The last I knew when I was learning about this, and I also learned about this quite a bit in my trauma recovery coaching course, is that it takes like 30% of attunement, your needs being met by your caregiver, for you to hopefully have a secure attachment, which really says a lot because 30% isn't a very high bar, but a lot of us, like, those needs were not met even 30% of the time, emotionally, physically, all kinds of things. So what happens is a lot of times we end up with insecure attachment. We either end up with avoidant attachment, where, again, I'm very, very much paraphrasing because I didn't come on here to give a whole, 30 minutes about attachment style. So again, if this is something that you would like me to talk about more, I'm happy to do an entire episode about attachment. There's also, like I said, tons of resources available online. But that avoidant attachment is like you start to feel like someone's encroaching upon you, or you feel like, oh my gosh, the feelings are involved. I don't like this. And so you withdraw, you pull away. So maybe you're in a relationship or you're starting to see someone and someone comes up to you and says, hey, what are we? And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I liked you yesterday, but this is too much for me. I just need to withdraw. Maybe you ghost them. Maybe you stay with them, but you're constantly like pulling back. Kind of what we think of as like closed off. These are some things that can come with avoidant attachment. Anxious attachment is typically what we think of when it's someone who, you're anxious. You're kind of constantly wondering, does this person love me? Where do I fit in this situation? Am I safe here? Um, because again, and I believe that with like the avoidant child, they sort of learned that their parents were unreliable and they were like, I am not going to lean on you because you're not consistently there for me. So I just don't need anyone. I'm just going to be independent and I'll take care of myself. Whereas anxious people, they're constantly trying to get that, again, I'm generalizing. They're trying to get that connection. They're trying different ways to get it. And so in this scenario, you're the one who maybe comes forward and says, hey, what are we? Are we dating? Do you even like me? What is this relationship? Because your brain is just like, am I safe here? Again, can I depend on this person? What do I need to do to get this person to love me? That kind of thing. And then we have anxious avoidant is where you can see sort of a mixture of both, where you're kind of, some people call it disorganized attachment, where you're kind of like, sometimes you're reaching for connection, but then you can pull back and there isn't really a solid pattern. Again, both of those two sort of attachment styles are combined into one. It's a little cocktail of insecure attachment. And then we have secure attachment, where you're typically like, maybe you're good at communication. Maybe you know that, like, if you have a breakup, you'll be okay. You're like, this is unfortunate. You're much more able to handle the ups and downs in life. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean that you're not, you don't get hurt and you don't get sad, but it just means that you have a much more, like a higher capacity to handle relationships, the good, the bad, the ugly, as compared with the other three attachment styles. So that is that. And what happened was I had started to look for answers for what was wrong in my relationship. And of course, at the time, I thought it was me. And I found attachment and I read the book Attached. And again, while I'm saying these things, I want you to keep in mind that attachment, again, is a very real thing. All of us have an attachment system. Most of us have attachment wounds or attachment issues. Like I said, there are secure people out there, but a lot of people have attachment issues, right? Um, and so I found this book and I was reading it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I have anxious attachment. I think this is the problem. And I'm really, oh my gosh, my abuser, who of course I wasn't calling them that at the time, must have avoidant attachment. And this makes sense because it describes sort of the push-pull in the relationship and how, one person is pursuing and the other person is withdrawing and this and that and all of that. And again, that is a common relationship dynamic. And actually in the book talks about how it's like one of the hardest relationships to have. Um, and this has nothing to do with abuse. It's just two really wounded people who are trying kind of to be together, but it's just not working out right, versus secure and avoidant or secure and anxious. They can kind of make it work. Because the secure person's like, oh, I see you're struggling right now. You're withdrawing because this is too much for you. I'm still here. This is fine. Or, oh, you're anxious. You're asking for reassurance. Okay, yes, I'll reassure you, and then we'll go on with our lives. Versus that push-pull dynamic. So I was convinced for a long time that this was an attachment issue. In fact, I made like a series of posts on Instagram sort of talking about what I had learned about attachment and how hard, quote unquote, we were working on the relationship. We had come to realize this was a childhood trauma thing. Yes, it's hard work, but we're both putting in the work. We're doing all this stuff and so on, right? But it was a lot of my abuser had not read the book, but kind of flipped through it and was like, oh, you have disorganized attachment. So it very quickly became this thing of like, yeah, I might be avoidant, but really the problem is you because you're disorganized, you're back and forth, you're push pull. Like, Lindsay, this is kind of all about you and it's all your childhood trauma. Like, if you were something else, this could work, right? So that became another tool for the abuse. Um, and I believed it. So I would come on Instagram and I would, like, what is it like to date someone with a disorganized attachment? And how can you help a partner who has disorganized attachment and things like that? Spoiler alert, I do not have disorganized attachment. I think that I tend to be a little bit more avoidant. Although I didn't always know that. I kind of always thought that I was more secure, but I tend to avoid more than anything else. Not like extremely, but I'm kind of closed off, I'll be honest with you. After abuse, it's totally fair to be closed off, right? Um, but so that became a whole thing, and um, I stayed for a very long time because I just thought that that was the answer and that we could fix it. If I did enough therapy, in fact, I hired like an attachment coach to work with me. And that person really kept me in the relationship because, of course, this person only had my information, and my information was my abuser's information. And so this person was working really hard to help me be able to stay in the relationship. Just like our couples therapist was really coming at us with my abuser's information because that's what I was delivering too, keeping me in the relationship. And so this is why it's really important to know the difference between attachment issues and an attachment struggle and a push-pull dynamic in a relationship and abuse. Because abuse is going to be that, but on crazy steroids or something like that. Because yes, you will see that push-pull dynamic. You will see the back and forth, up and down. You will see one person probably with what seems to be disorganized attachment. And maybe you do have disorganized attachment because, again, childhood trauma, that's a very real thing. But in my case, for example, sorry, I have to get a drink of water. I didn't have disorganized attachment. I was extremely dysregulated and constantly in fight or flight from long-term, sustained emotional abuse, physical abuse, many different kinds of abuse, which is probably the case for a lot of us. And so when we are survivors of abuse, when we're victims, we're still in it. I like to use victim when we're in it and survivor when we're out. That just depends on the person in terms of what word feels comfortable for you. But we're still in these abusive situations. It's very likely that were we to be seen by someone, we would be misdiagnosed. We maybe would be labeled as borderline personality disorder, maybe NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. I haven't heard that as much besides like abusers trying to say that their partner was a narcissist. Again, someone being like, yeah, you seem to have attachment issues. Let's work on your attachment. Um, Lots of different things can be thought to be what you're struggling with. So with the abuse, when is it that next level of abuse? And I always like to tell people, again, go to the hotline.org, pull up their lists. They have list after list after list of things that are considered abuse. And so basically, you know, in an attachment issue relationship, I'm just going to call it that, there can be some abuse tactics happening. In fact, I have been in relationships like that where you just kind of know that the person they're not abusive and they're not doing it on purpose, but it's very unfortunate. And I've probably done this too, and you've probably done this. It's very unfortunate that, like, you got these childhood trauma, little triggers, you're feeling hurt, and you say something you don't mean. You're blaming the other person, you're not communicating well. So there's these little things that definitely can be abuse tactics, but they're just really unfortunately happening because you were never taught communication. Maybe you don't have secure attachment, you're hurting, and hopefully in those cases eventually you come back and you attune, which is critical in a relationship, is that you're able to repair the rupture that has happened. So if fight happens, you're anxious and avoidant, maybe you're like, I need some time, blah 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 blah. You come back and you attune, you repair, you apologize and genuinely mean it, you communicate about what happened once your nervous systems are calm. In an abusive relationship, that's not going to happen. The blaming, the blame shifting, gaslighting, manipulation, guilt tripping, all of these tactics are happening. Maybe there's some physical abuse thrown in there, financial abuse, all of this stuff is happening, and there's no attunement. There might be fake attunement where they see that you're packing a bag and trying to leave, and they come over and they get on their knees and they're groveling and they're saying, I can't live without you, or where am I going to live, or, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, I'm such a sad little baby. Something like that happens. But it's not real attunement. I remember times when quote unquote attunement would happen and I still felt yucky. I still did not feel genuinely safe or hopeful that things were actually going to get better. You sort of, I feel like a lot of times we know, it's so hard to listen to our gut in these situations because we've been, being gaslighted this whole time. And so it's like, what am I feeling? Is this real? Um, but I would feel yucky. And here's an example is one time we were in couples therapy and I was very upset. This was near the end of the relationship, like maybe a few months before we broke up. And I was most of the time in therapy, I would be curled up in a little ball. And I remember like going to therapy feeling like it was two against one and I was going to have to just survive my way through this hour. And my abuser put their arm around me and the therapist was like, Lindsay, they put their arm around you. What does this mean to you? And I said, I know what it's supposed to mean, but I don't feel like it really means that. And I also said, I know that as soon as we hang up here, it's going to be just like it always is. AKA, this is just happening right now because they're trying to show you how hard they're working. They're pretending during therapy that they're working really hard with me, but the reality is the actions aren't matching up with their words. You know what I'm saying? And so you will eventually get a sense of whether or not it's actual attunement. If it's actual attunement, you're hopefully leaving that conversation feeling safe. You're able to go to sleep next to this person knowing that they're genuinely trying and you're genuinely trying versus feeling still just unseen, unheard, confused about what just happened, um, and just not loved. Like you're just like, all right, well, we ended the conversation, I guess, on a good note, and they're already asleep, and your mind is still racing and your mind's still going. Again, I hope that those two differences, and the biggest thing for me is that attunement happening after a rupture, or is it just like rupture and sweep it under the rug? Yes, sometimes in healthy relationships it's swept under the rug because you have to go to work, or one of you has a work trip and they're gone for 2 weeks or something, or the kids are there and you haven't had time to talk. Of course, life isn't perfect. It's not a movie. You know, someone's not going to chase you down on a motorcycle in New York City and you get out of the cab and you hug and then you don't move to another place for your job. You end up staying with this person. I'm talking about How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And, that's not real life. So, yes, that can happen. But in an abusive relationship, more often than not, they're false apologizing and expecting you to sweep under the rug whatever's happened. They physically abused you, you need to sweep it under the rug. They cheated on you, sweep it under the rug. And it's always going to be some kind of like, I'm sorry you feel this way, I'm sorry you're hurt. I wouldn't have cheated on you if you hadn't done this, or it's all because when we were first hanging out, you were talking to this other person, and I still just feel so hurt by it. So I had to go and reach back to my 14 other exes and just get some comfort for them because I'm so broken. It's just always this sob story on and on, just kind of like talking in circles. None of it really makes sense. So again, you'll still feel confused. You'll still be like, I really don't know where I stand in this relationship. I don't know if I'm loved. I don't know if this person's capable of loving. I don't even know if I love them at this point. It's still just going to be a very confusing time, right? Now, all of that aside, I really do encourage you, if you're still confused about whether it's abuse or not, to go to the hotline.org again and look at each section of, you just go to hotline.org and then they have a tab if you scroll down called Identify Abuse. And then there's one called Warning Signs of Abuse. They talk about why people abuse. It's all kind of stuff. It's free right here. And each kind of abuse has several sort of, this is what this looks like: emotional abuse, calling you names, insulting you, criticizing you, acting jealous or possessive, refusing to trust you, isolating you from family or friends or people in your life because it makes someone easier to control, monitoring your activities, attempting to control what you wear, including clothes, makeup, hairstyles, humiliating you, gaslighting you, refusing to listen to you, pretending not to understand, questioning your recollection of facts, trivializing your needs or feelings, threatening you, damaging your belongings, blaming you for their behavior, accusing you of cheating, all kinds of stuff, right? I'm just like trying to plow through this list. But if these things are happening, more than likely it's abuse and not attachment. Again, a little bit of that here and there, because of poor communication and attachment issues. You're triggered, you're acting out on those panicky rejection or abandonment wound feelings, but you were able to, once your nervous system is calm, be like, that was horrible of me. I was really mean when I came in and yelled at you because dinner wasn't ready yet. I was just so hangry. What I really should have done is just grab a bar and started a protein bar and started helping you cook. That's not cool. Tomorrow night I'll be more aware. I'll bring an apple to eat on the way home or something like that. The abusive person is not going to do that. The abusive person is going to make this whole thing into a way bigger, horrible event than it needed to be. So I hope that is helpful. This is a really important issue for me because, again, yes, attachment is very real. I've given some examples of attachment. Again, it was brief, simply to use as like sort of this, side by side, this is this, this is that. I didn't go in depth with it, but it's something that did keep me in the relationship, and it was something that gave me hope, made me think really that was what was going on, and in the long run was just harming me further. And of course, like I mentioned, my abuser learned about it and also used that to harm me, to keep me around, to make me feel like I was the problem and all of that stuff. So attachment is important. Please learn about it for yourself, for your own healing, for your childhood, emotional neglect and trauma healing, and for your own kids. I have a lot more compassion for my parents, my siblings, friends, because I now understand attachment, childhood emotional neglect, all of that stuff. But I really do not want this to be something that you latch on like I did and have that be one of the many reasons that you're staying longer with an abusive person. That's all for today. I want to remind you that I am a certified trauma recovery coach. I offer 30 and 60-minute sessions as well as a 6-week program. I'm starting to add a little bit more to those. I do a lot of working with people who are still in abusive relationships and need that help understanding what's going on, making a safety plan, figuring out where they're going to go, what they're going to do with their things, and getting out and starting that healing process. I also work with people who are already out and just really are trying to find themselves again. Those are two of my sort of sweet spot passion areas. I really just want you to be okay and to know that you can be happy and healthy and safe again, because that's what I've been working on, and it's really near and dear to my heart. So got that going on, and I also have my LGBTQ plus survivor support group one Saturday a month. Check that out. You can find all of those sort of booking informations on thelindsaygoodman.com. Just click on the coaching tab. Okay. Sorry, my brain just sort of turned off there. Also, I want to say thank you for listening. As always, I really appreciate all of you who spend your valuable time listening to this podcast. If you like it, please rate, review, subscribe, whether you're listening to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or if you're watching this on YouTube. I really want to get this into the ears of the people who need this the most, and your interactions really do make that happen. I do read all of the reviews that come up on Apple iTunes, so I really appreciate that. That is all I have for now, so please go and take care of yourselves and drink some water. I'll be back with more next week.